Her son covered her mouth mid-sentence. At her own dinner table, Margaret Thomas, widow and lifelong homemaker, didn't say another word. Michael, her only son and self-declared decision-maker, smiled like the room belonged to him. By sunrise, the house did not. She'd signed the deed, sealed the transfer, and erased his access with a single click, and when he tried to undo it, the county records told him she'd already left silence behind. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Silverware drops, a glass tilts, but steadies. The fork slipped from her fingers. It clattered against the porcelain plate, bounced once, then hit the hardwood floor with a sound too loud for such a small thing. The room didn't just fall silent, it collapsed into it, like breath sucked from lungs at the same moment. She looked across the table. Her son had frozen mid-chew, the muscles in his jaw locked tight. His eyes darted toward her, sharp, assessing. The glint there wasn't concern, it was warning. Her hand trembled as she reached for the glass of water. The rim tilted, ice clinked, the water wobbled dangerously but held. She steadied it, barely. Her throat burned, not from thirst, but from the words caught there. Words she had every intention of saying. "You know," she began, her voice a low thread. "I've been thinking about the—" His hand came up, fast, flat palm, 2 fingers extended. He didn't shout, didn't even raise his voice, just reached across the conversation and cut her off. "Stop," he said, barely louder than a whisper. "Just stop talking before you ruin this." The rest of the table, his wife, his daughter, his sister, held still like props on a stage. Even the ceiling fan, for once, seemed to hesitate in its spin. Her breath caught. The edges of her napkin curled beneath her fingers. She glanced sideways. Her daughter, Emily, sat stiff-backed, cloth napkin half folded in her lap. Her gaze flicked up for a second, then down again. She didn't speak. Across the table, a serving spoon settled back into the casserole dish with a soft clink. The room had no more sound to give. The old clock over the entryway ticked. Too loud, too rhythmic, like it was measuring the space between her restraint and her rage. Every second passed like a dare. She lowered her eyes. Her son leaned back in his chair, resuming his meal like nothing had happened. She watched his fork slice into the roast she had made, the same recipe her husband used to love, before the stroke took his voice. Before the world narrowed into this house and this table and this shrinking space where her words were no longer welcome. The sound of fabric brushing against wood, her daughter shifting in her seat, broke through her spiraling thoughts. It's very good, Mom," Emily offered softly, voice stretched thin. "The potatoes, I mean." She nodded without speaking. Her hands curled around the table edge, knuckles whitening, gripping more than just wood. She was holding on to the only thing that wouldn't betray her. Across from her, her son reached for the butter, his face smooth and self-satisfied. As if he'd won something. She wanted to scream, or maybe cry, or maybe just stand up and flip the table and let the roast and the potatoes and the glasses all crash into the polished hardwood like her voice had earlier. But she didn't. Instead, she took a slow breath, the kind she used to take before a parent-teacher conference when she knew the teacher was going to say something stupid about her child. That kind of breath, the quiet, collected kind that masks the fact you're building a war behind your teeth. Her spine straightened, an inch at a time. The resolve didn't come all at once. It never does. It slid in silently, like cold water seeping under a locked door. She pressed the napkin into her lap, folded it precisely, and lifted her chin. Her son didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He thought the moment had passed, that he'd managed to wrangle her silence with one cutting sentence and the weight of her own guilt. But she wasn't silenced. Not really, not anymore. Because in that heavy pause between seconds, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would begin. Lamplight pools on home deed. The house creaked like it was settling secrets into its bones. Downstairs, the old radiator hissed and popped, but upstairs, in the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, the world had narrowed to the pool of lamplight spread across her desk. She didn't sleep. Not really. Not anymore. She sat straight in the chair her husband once used to pay bills and write birthday cards in his cramped, blocky script. Her hands were folded on the desk, the knuckles still sore from clenching the edge of the table earlier that evening. The crisp manila folder lay open in front of her, a copy of the house deed, inked and legal. Her index finger hovered just above the page, then dropped. It landed on the signature line. Just one name. Only his. She exhaled, but the breath caught halfway. Her fingertip stayed pressed on the name like she could burn it into memory, or maybe burn it away. Behind her, Emily shifted on the bed, the blankets rustling gently. She'd insisted on staying the night, claimed she was worried about icy roads, though no snow had fallen in 3 days. She'd said it too quickly, too pointedly, and with too much softness in her eyes. "You okay, Mom?" came her voice now, low and grainy with sleep. She didn't turn. Emily pushed herself up slowly, wrapping the robe tighter around her small frame. She came over, placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. Just her presence, quiet, calm, said more than any attempt at comfort could. "I found the folder," she said simply. Her mother nodded. "It's not just the name," she said after a pause. "It's what the name did." Emily didn't respond, not with words. She squeezed gently. The silence returned, thick but not heavy. The kind of silence where truth has space to breathe. A small notebook lay next to the folder. She opened it now, flipping through pages filled with looping cursive, notations, amounts, names, moments. "Your father, he said we'd change it after," she murmured. "After the mortgage was paid off, after the refinance, after Emily's college, after his stroke. Too many afters. Not enough now." She let out a sound, half sigh, half laugh, the kind that aches as it escapes. "Do you know what I've done for this family?" she said softly, not really asking. "What I gave up, and now I need permission to speak at my own table." Her voice didn't tremble. It sharpened. Emily pulled a chair beside her. "You don't need permission," she said. "You just need to decide what's yours again." She reached into her own purse and pulled out a thin laptop. It glowed to life, casting light up into their faces like the beginning of something holy, or dangerous, or both. Her mother stared at the screen as Emily clicked through. "We've got all the papers, all the tax records, everything you need." There was no dramatic music, no lightning strike, just the soft click of keys, the scrolling of the cursor, the login box that blinked on screen like it had been waiting all this time. Her heart beat steadily in her ears. She navigated to the county assessor's portal, where land ownership could be filed and transferred with a few careful keystrokes, if you knew how. And they did. Emily had worked in escrow for 7 years. Her name wasn't just a whisper in this process. It was leverage. Her finger hovered again. The cursor blinked, patient. "You ready?" Emily asked. The woman nodded once. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a decision she'd waited too long to make. She clicked. They sat there for a few more minutes watching the confirmation load. A new deed, a shared name, a beginning. Her pulse slowed. No, steadied, anchored. "I'm going to need to be strong," she whispered. "You already are," Emily said. The woman looked up at the digital clock on the nightstand. 2:13 a.m. Outside, dawn hadn't broken, but the darkness didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like an ending, or a waiting place. She closed the manila folder, hands calm, because tomorrow she wouldn't be asking. She'd be telling. Fingers tap submit under muted sunrise. The morning didn't announce itself. It slipped in slowly, dim and gray, nudging through the slats in the blinds, like it was hesitant to disturb what had happened in the dark. She sat at the same desk, her robe still cinched at the waist, hands folded once again, but this time not in indecision. The screen glowed pale against her face. The deed transfer form was complete, reviewed 3 times, every field checked and double-checked. Her cursor hovered over the last button. Submit. Outside the window, a thin mist hung in the yard, blurring the tips of the trees and the neighbor's shed. Morning birds called softly, disoriented by the cloudy dawn. She let the quiet stretch just one more breath, and then tapped the key. A subtle whoosh of transition. Nothing exploded, no bells rang, just a single ding, her inbox pinging with the confirmation email. She stared at the subject line, Deed Transfer, Successfully Filed, Confirmation Number 7423AB-11. Her chest tightened, not with fear, not quite, more like reverence, the sort of feeling you get after stepping onto solid ground from a long, unstable bridge. Footsteps padded in behind her. Emily, now fully dressed in jeans and a soft black sweater, hair pulled into a low twist. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, one for each of them, and the printer-warm document in her hand. "I thought you'd want a hard copy," Emily said quietly, offering the crisp page. She took it, fingers brushing the edges like it might crumble. Her eyes didn't blink. They moved slowly over the top margin, then dropped to the signature block at the bottom. 2 names now, her husband's and hers, side by side, equal. Tears didn't come, not yet. But the pressure behind. Her eyes ached with the weight of everything this one piece of paper carried. It wasn't just ownership, it was acknowledgement. She wasn't just staying here. She wasn't a caretaker borrowing space. This was hers, in writing. At last. She pressed the paper to her chest, eyes closing just for a second. The house felt different, as if it had finally recognized her after all these years of pretending not to. Emily set her coffee down beside her. "I'll scan a copy for the file. The legal record will be up in 24 hours, she said softly. The woman nodded. "He won't know yet, will he?" Emily shook her head. "Not unless he checks the county site himself, which he won't. Not unless—" She trailed off. They both knew what the silence meant. He wouldn't suspect a thing until he needed to see the deed, and by then the landscape would have changed. The woman turned the page over, fingers smoothing out an invisible crease. Her mouth was set, but not hard, just steady. "I don't want to fight," she said, "but I'm done disappearing in my own house." Emily reached over, brushing a thumb beneath her mother's eye. "You don't have to explain," she said. "You've already done the hardest part." The sun finally cleared the neighbor's roofline, slipping through the blinds and painting thin golden stripes across the hardwood floor. They sat there quietly, steam curling up from their mugs. And then, a sound, the distant rumble of a car engine. Familiar. Too early. Emily glanced at the clock. "He's not due till 10, she said, eyes narrowing. They moved at the same time, Emily stepping to the front window, the woman folding the deed and tucking it neatly into a slim drawer. No panic, just preparation. She stood as the car door slammed shut outside, the heavy boots, the familiar cadence of his stride on the porch boards. A knock, 3 slow raps. Not the kind that asked for permission, the kind that announced arrival. She looked once more at the drawer. The deed was in her name now, but that didn't mean the storm wouldn't come. Envelope lands with soft thud. The sound was too final for something so quiet. A manila envelope, thick with its own gravity, landed square on the dining table. The table was empty now. No roast, no cutlery, no small talk about potatoes. Just wood, silence, and paper. She'd chosen Oak Island deliberately. A public place, but off the radar. The Nature Reserve's wooden observation deck sat high enough over the marsh to catch wind, to hear birdsong, and, most importantly, to keep conversations from echoing beyond its railings. He stood across from her now, arms folded, jaw tight. A muscle ticked in his cheek. Emily lingered beside her mother, unreadable, arms hanging easy but her posture alert. Watchful. The envelope sat between them like an ultimatum. His hand hovered. "What is this?" She didn't answer immediately, just watched the wind brush through the reeds behind him, bending them in unison like even the marsh knew how to listen. He picked it up and flipped the seal. Paper crackled as he pulled out the deed. The page trembled faintly, whether from the wind or his hands wasn't clear. His eyes scanned quickly at first, then slowed. Emily's voice cut through. Calm, controlled. "It's done." His gaze snapped up to her, then to his mother. "You filed this?" No answer. His fingers tightened on the paper. "Without telling me?" Still, she said nothing. The silence thickened, less from discomfort and more from intent. She wasn't there to explain. She wasn't there to argue. She was there to stand, finally, on her own ground. The wind tugged at the edge of the paper. He let it flap once, then clutched it tighter. His chest rose and fell, slow at first, then quicker. A deep inhale, almost a laugh, but nothing about it was funny. "You couldn't wait until we had a real conversation?" he asked, tone sharpening. "We did," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, steady. "You just weren't listening." His face darkened. "This is what you want? A legal knife through the family?" She shook her head slowly. "This isn't a knife. This is a name. Mine." For a moment, something in him wavered. His fingers relaxed. But then he stepped back, just half a pace. The old wooden planks of the deck creaked under his heel. "I hope you know what this starts," he said. "I do," she replied. Her voice wasn't hard. It was anchored. Emily stood a little closer to her now, shoulder nearly touching. Support without statement. He folded the document sharply and slid it back into the envelope like he was trying not to tear it. Then he looked around, as if realizing, perhaps for the first time, that they were in public, that he didn't control the setting, or the optics. He lowered his voice. "You're going to regret going behind my back." "I didn't go behind it," she said. "I went around it." A flicker of shock crossed his face, not at her words, but at their firmness. Then, nothing. He straightened, slipping the envelope under his arm. "We'll see what Dad would have thought." Her expression didn't change. "We already know. He's the one who promised me the change." That stopped him. The breath hitched in his chest, briefly visible, before he masked it with a scoff and turned to go. His boots met the deck hard. Step, step. Another creak beneath weight, not just physical. She watched his back as he moved down the ramp, envelope tucked against him like a weapon with no trigger. He didn't look back, not once. Emily exhaled beside her. "That went better than I thought." Her mother didn't speak, just placed both hands on the rail, eyes scanning the water below, flat, reflective, hiding whatever currents moved beneath. "I think he'll come back different," Emily offered. "No," she said. She turned away from the rail. "He'll come back smarter." Counter's chill presses into palms. Her palms pressed flat against the cool granite. The kitchen was clean, too clean. Not a mug in the sink, not a crumb on the floor. Even the kettle had been polished to a dull shine, its handle aligned exactly parallel to the edge of the stove. She stood on one side of the island, elbows locked, gaze fixed on the window above the sink. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting thin shadows across the tiles like slashes. Behind her, the door creaked open. She didn't turn. She didn't have to. His footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, too heavy for casual, too soft for hostile. He stopped at the threshold for a beat too long before stepping in. She could feel him there, behind her. Not touching, not speaking, just waiting. Her breath remained steady, but her heart had started to thud again, low, stubborn beats in her ears. A steady reminder that her silence was no longer submission. It was choice. The refrigerator hummed. The house creaked once in its foundation. Then, finally, "Why?" His voice was flat, not curious, accusing. She turned slowly, arms still braced behind her against the counter. He stood near the breakfast nook, shoulders stiff, eyes not angry. Not exactly. More like betrayed. He was still holding the envelope, though it hung slack at his side now. The corner of the paper peeked out like a torn flag. "Why now?" he said again, softer. "Why go this far?" She didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. The words were lined up, tight behind her teeth, but something about saying them out loud in this kitchen, her kitchen, made them feel more permanent. Emily entered behind him, carrying 2 grocery bags. She paused in the doorway when she saw them, the tension, the stillness. Her gaze moved between them. "I'll put these away later," she said gently, and set the bags down on the edge of the table. She moved toward her mother, slow but sure, placing a light hand on her back. a simple gesture that gave her spine just enough steel. "It's not about going far," the woman finally said. "It's about stopping the erosion, before there's nothing left of me." Her son didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. "So this is self-preservation?" "No," she said. "It's self-respect." He glanced down, jaw tightening. A flash of something? Guilt? Shame? It passed too quickly to catch. "Everything I've done, everything we've built was supposed to be for this family," he said. "And now you're drawing lines in the sand." "No," she repeated. "I'm redrawing the ones that were erased when I stopped being seen as part of it." Emily let out a quiet exhale beside her. Not relief, just reinforcement. She said nothing, but her hand stayed right there. Solid, silent agreement. The air thickened. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just space, charged and humming like an approaching storm. He stepped forward once, not threateningly, almost cautiously. "I thought we understood each other better than this," he said. His voice was softer now, maybe even honest. "We didn't," she replied. The fridge hummed again. A bird chirped distantly outside. He looked at her like he was trying to find something familiar in her face and couldn't. His grip on the envelope shifted. "I need time," he murmured. She nodded. Not agreement, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. "You have it," she said, "but time doesn't pause anything, especially ownership." The words settled between them like dust. He gave a single slow nod, then turned. The sound of his shoes retreating across the tile was nearly silent, but it echoed. The door clicked shut behind him. She didn't move for a moment, just stood there, both hands on the counter again, the cold seeping back into her skin. Emily looked at her. That could have gone worse. Her mother nodded. "But it also could have gone quiet," she said. Emily tilted her head. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned back toward the window and smiled, just slightly, because her son hadn't raised his voice, which meant he was calculating again, and calculating men don't walk away. Files open under golden lamp glow. The lamp cast a warm halo across the table, softening the hard corners of the manila folders spread open like surgical incisions. They were in Emily's dining room now, neutral ground, a space untouched by memory or power dynamics, no family portraits, no inherited wallpaper, just quiet, cream-colored walls and the hum of a heating vent. The woman sat upright, fingers interlaced in her lap, though her gaze never left the forms in front of her. County documents, notarized letters, a breakdown of ownership history, pages and pages of things she never thought she'd need to understand. Emily sat beside her, laptop open, scrolling through legal PDFs with calm precision. Across from them, Charles, the attorney, clicked his pen once, then again, before finally setting it down. He was younger than she'd expected, clean-shaven, with sleeves rolled and a gold wedding band that flashed when he reached for a binder. "I need to say this plainly," he said, voice low but even. "There's a risk of countersuit." The words landed hard, not sharp, but solid, like a weight added to a backpack already full. She didn't flinch, but her eyes narrowed slightly. He could claim coercion, emotional manipulation, maybe even elder financial abuse depending on how he frames the timeline. The woman said nothing. Emily, however, sat up straighter. "We have documentation," Emily said. "Every step, every transfer, every form done legally and transparently." Charles nodded. "I'm not saying he'll win. I'm saying he'll try. That kind of man doesn't like losing power, especially not to his mother." The woman's fingers tightened together just slightly, enough that her knuckles rose pale beneath the skin. "I need you to know what could happen if this escalates," Charles said, softer now. "Not just in court, but in your family." The silence hung, thick with things already known but finally named. Emily slid a document forward. "We'd like to initiate arbitration preemptively," she said. "Cut off litigation before he gets traction." Charles gave a short nod and began scribbling something on a yellow legal pad. "Good. Monday morning at 8 o'clock. I'll book it and send confirmation." The scratch of pen on paper sounded louder than it should have. It echoed through the small room, syncing with the slow rise and fall of the woman's breath. She reached for the signed documents now, steady but slow, her hand brushing lightly across the margins as if absorbing them through touch. For a moment, the words blurred on the page, and suddenly, unexpectedly, a thought sliced through. Did I go too far? The question didn't ask for permission. It didn't even need an answer. It simply existed, sharp and whispering. She blinked it away gently. No. She hadn't, but the doubt lingered like smoke. I used to make peanut butter sandwiches at this table, she said quietly, her eyes still fixed on the papers. Charles looked up, unsure how to respond. She turned to Emily. Remember? You hated crusts. I cut them off every time, even when I was late for work. Emily smiled faintly. I remember. She tapped the page again. This table's not about lawsuits. It's about who gets to decide what I leave behind. Charles glanced at the clock. Monday, 8 a.m. The woman nodded once. Emily reached for her pen, hesitated just long enough for the moment to feel real, and then signed. The final stroke of the pen rang like punctuation. A deep inhale filled the room, the kind drawn not from lungs, but from spine and memory and every silent year that came before this one. I'm ready, she said. Charles gathered the documents, but before he could close the binder, the woman's phone buzzed. A text. She reached for it. From, Michael heard you lawyering up. We'll see how deep you really want to dig. Her hand didn't tremble, but Emily saw her mother's jaw set like stone. Footsteps tap in parquet hallway. The courthouse hallway was too quiet. Every sound felt amplified, the shuffle of heels, the creak of old benchwood, the soft clack of the mediator's door closing behind the last client. She walked slowly, her boots tapping in time with her breath. The floor beneath her was polished parquet, shiny enough to show faint reflections, not enough to admire, just enough to notice how stiff she'd become. Emily walked beside her, holding a slim accordion file. She looked calm, composed, but her other hand, clutching a narrow notepad, was clenched just tight enough to turn her knuckles pale. Michael stood at the far end of the hallway, alone. Jacket draped over one arm, sleeves rolled up, jaw clenched like he'd bitten into something bitter. He didn't move until she was almost near. Then he stepped forward, 2 strides too fast, like a man trying not to look like he's panicking. Mom, he said, voice lower than usual, can we just talk? His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't angry either. It trembled, just slightly, not in fear, but in loss of certainty. She didn't stop walking, not at first. But when she did, it was with precision, like someone planting themselves before a storm. We're about to do that, she said. His shoulders dropped half an inch. You know this doesn't have to go to mediation. We can settle this ourselves. Emily stepped slightly forward, one foot protective, the other composed. Michael, we gave you that chance. I wasn't ready, he said. I didn't realize what this was really about. His voice cracked near the end, but not enough to ruin the performance. It was a good tactic. Regret threaded with charm. Years ago it would have worked. Now it just rang hollow. Then maybe you'll hear us better in a room with a third chair, his mother said, voice steady. He stared at her. She didn't flinch. The mediator's door opened down the hallway. A soft voice called, Room 3A, please. They entered silently. The table was smaller than she expected. The lighting was soft, intentionally disarming. A ceramic clock ticked on the shelf behind the mediator, who wore neutral beige and an expression to match. Michael sat to the right, she and Emily to the left. The mediator clicked her pen, nodded, and began. Today is not about judgment or punishment. This is about resolution. Let's begin with statements. Michael spoke first, and for a moment, just a moment, his voice sounded real. I never tried to shut you out, he said, turning toward his mother. I've just been trying to manage everything. Since Dad passed, I've been carrying it. He paused. And maybe I didn't realize how much I expected you to stay in the background. Emily inhaled sharply beside her mother, as if bracing for the rest. I didn't mean to make you feel erased, he added, but this, lawyers, public filings, that's not family, that's war. The mediator turned to her. She looked at Michael. Then, without raising her voice, without even blinking hard, she said, "You thought I'd be content with legacy through labor. Quiet hours. No name on anything. No voice in the room. That's not family either." Silence. The mediator scribbled a note. A full 30 seconds passed. Then, almost too softly to catch, "We'll break for 5 minutes, then move to rebuttal rounds." The chairs creaked as they stood. Outside the room again, the air felt thin. Too many words spoken, and yet not enough. She walked slowly toward the far window, watching the afternoon sun spread across the courthouse lawn. Emily followed behind, voice hushed. "You held your ground." "I expected fury," her mother murmured. "He's trying a different play," Emily said. "Charm." They stood side by side, barely touching, watching a leaf swirl on the breeze outside. Inside, the mediator called, "Rebuttals begin in 5. The woman didn't move yet. She looked at her reflection in the glass, aged, lined, tired, but unmistakably visible. And for the first time, not alone. But still, her mind spun. The stakes had changed. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was reframing the story. Lamp flickers on witness list. The kitchen was dark except for the lamp above the table, flickering faintly like it was struggling to stay awake with her. The legal packet lay unopened beside her teacup, the paper slightly curled at the corners from humidity or dread. She reached for it but stopped midway. Her fingers hovered, unsure whether they wanted to open or erase what was inside. Across from her, Emily sat barefoot, knees drawn up on one of the dining chairs, a throw blanket slung loosely over her shoulders. She sipped tea in silence, the kind of silence that knew not to fill itself. "They've sent the list," her mother said finally. Emily didn't ask which list. She already knew. 3 names on his side, the woman said. His wife, a former CPA, and... She hesitated. "Uncle Henry." Emily winced. "Henry? Really?" She nodded. "Character witness." A long pause. "I don't think he's trying to win anymore," she said softly. "I think he's trying to bury me." Emily set her mug down gently. "We can still shift. Mediation is fluid. He threw the first blow in arbitration. He might accept a new middle path now." "I don't want a middle path," her mother replied. Then quieter. "But I also don't want a fracture that never heals." The light flickered again. Emily leaned forward. "Mom, you don't have to win everything to reclaim your place. Sometimes dignity looks like walking away first." Her mother looked down at the packet again. Somewhere inside that envelope were names meant to reduce her to a timeline, a witness's statement about what she'd once said, what she'd failed to say, what she should have done differently. The tightness in her chest bloomed slow and painful, a sorrow that felt not like regret, but like a kind of mourning. "Your brother's trying to rewrite our history," she whispered, "and I don't know if staying silent in mediation is strength or surrender." Emily reached out, her fingers warm as they brushed the back of her mother's hand. "You're not silent," she said. "You're choosing what to say next." The flicker of the lamp steadied. Outside, the wind brushed the house like a gentle reminder that the world was still turning. But inside the room, time felt stalled. Every breath weighed against the choice in front of her. Compassion or principle, peace or proof. She unfolded the legal notice finally, slowly. Inside, clipped neatly to the top, was a scanned list of names, typed, impersonal, clinical. But beneath it, something else. An addendum she hadn't expected. A note from Charles. "He's filed a petition to include Dad's living will as evidence. Claims you manipulated access after the stroke. This may become more than ownership." Her breath caught. Not rage, not fear, grief. Because this wasn't just about the house anymore. He was reaching backward now, grabbing at the only man who could no longer defend her. Emily leaned in, eyes scanning the paper. "He's willing to question Dad's dignity just to win," she said. Her mother didn't respond. She stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out across the moonlit backyard. The trees swayed. The old bird bath glinted faintly. Everything looked the same, but everything inside her had shifted. She pressed one hand to her chest, then the other to the windowsill. Her head bowed, not in defeat, but in silent pause. Maybe prayer. Maybe grief. Maybe something between the two. Emily stayed behind her, silent. The lamp behind them flickered once more and went still. Echoing steps into arbitration room. Her heels struck the hallway tile with an unhurried rhythm, not rushed, not hesitant, just ready. Each step echoed against the neutral walls of the Municipal Arbitration Center. Nothing about the space warm, but nothing overtly cruel either. It was bureaucracy incarnate, beige, clean, indifferent. She carried no briefcase, just a single folder and a thin-lined notepad. Emily walked beside her, more visibly composed, shoulders squared, lips pressed in quiet confidence. The click of her pen cap in her palm was the only sign of nerves. Ahead, the wooden double doors stood open. Room B14, the final round. Inside, the long rectangular table gleamed beneath fluorescent lighting. 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other. A large wall clock ticked audibly above the mediator's head. Michael was already seated, suit jacket buttoned, tie slightly off-center. He looked tired, but not beaten, just restrained, like a man saving his energy for the last lap. He didn't rise when they entered. The mediator glanced up. "We'll begin," she said, setting her glasses on the bridge of her nose. "Today's goal is clarity, not closure." The woman nodded. Understood. She sat and folded her hands in front of her. The witness statements were stacked neatly near the center of the table, but the mediator didn't reach for them. Instead, she gestured to the mother first. "If you'd like to offer your final perspective before recommendations are rendered." The woman took a breath. She didn't read from notes. She didn't raise her voice. She simply began. "I was a wife to a man who, for 37 years, never once asked me to leave the room while decisions were being made. And yet somehow, after his stroke, my presence started to shrink, not because he pushed me out, but because someone else stepped in." She looked at Michael. Not accusing, not hostile, just clear. "I never wanted a courtroom. But when you start erasing someone with silence, you leave them no other tool but paper." The mediator scribbled something. The sound of pen against pad was the only movement in the room. "I fed this family," she continued. "I balanced our ledgers by hand. I signed his name to holiday cards when he couldn't. I was the one who cleaned the feeding tubes and mowed the lawn when the home nurse didn't show. And yet when the house was nearly paid off, I was no longer on the deed, just included in meals, not decisions." Emily glanced sideways, a small, proud nod. Michael exhaled through his nose. Hard. "I didn't lock you out," he said. "You locked yourself away in grief." The woman's lips parted, just slightly, but she said nothing. She didn't need to, because in that moment, everyone in the room heard the deflection, even the mediator. After a long pause, the woman looked at her again. "I don't need to win. I need the record to reflect the truth. My name belongs next to his. Not because of what I want to claim, but because of what I already lived." The silence that followed held weight. The mediator closed the folder. "I recommend a sealed agreement," she said, voice neutral but not cold. "No public filings, both parties retain dignity, property split remains legally upheld, emotional language removed from testimony." Michael looked as if he might object, but his mother's steady gaze froze the words in his throat. The mediator passed the document down the line. Her pen clicked once. She signed first. Emily's signature followed. Michael stared at the pen a second longer than necessary before finally lifting it. His name came out shakier. The mediator stood. "Thank you. This will conclude our session. You'll receive official notice within the week." Chairs scraped softly. Paper shuffled. They filed out one by one. No handshakes, no backward glances. Outside, the wind had picked up. The sidewalk shimmered faintly from a light drizzle that must have fallen while they were inside. They walked in silence toward the parking lot. No small talk. No relief. At the car, Emily touched her mother's shoulder. "It's over." The woman looked up at the gray sky. "No," she said. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. "It's settled." "That's not the same thing." Feet shuffled toward exit. The soft echo of shoes on the linoleum floor was the only sound in the hallway as they exited the arbitration room. No one spoke. The door clicked shut behind them with a polite finality, as if the institution had no more to offer. They didn't look back. Her feet moved slowly, deliberately, not from exhaustion, but from the surreal weightlessness that follows a war concluded by signature. Her hands were empty now. The folder had been surrendered, the statements given, the silence endured. Emily walked beside her, exhaling at last. A sound somewhere between a sigh and a release. They reached the elevator. The down arrow lit up. Neither of them spoke during the ride. When they reached the lobby, the clerk behind the glass slid the stamped file into a thin envelope and offered a polite nod. "Copy for your records," he said. She took it. The click of the file being sealed sounded louder than expected, like the punctuation at the end of a story. Except she knew better. That wasn't the end. It was only the pause before the next chapter. Outside, the drizzle had passed. Sunlight streamed through the glass entryway, catching in the grooves of the tile and splashing gold across the corridor. Dust floated in the light like tiny particles of grace. She paused in it, just for a second. Let it touch her face. Let it remind her there was still warmth in the world, even in bureaucratic places. Back home, the kettle was already whistling when they walked through the door. Emily moved to the stove, flicked off the burner and poured water over loose tea leaves in a waiting pot. The scent of lavender and black currant curled up through the air like a ribbon. The woman walked to the table and sat. No need to speak. Her shoulders dropped slowly, tension bleeding off one breath at a time. She opened her phone, not compulsively but deliberately. A single new message. Charles. Recommendation filed. Signed order pending judge's stamp. Mediation sealed, no public record unless escalated. Unless you want it public. She stared at the final line. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Emily placed the mug gently in front of her. "We could leave it here," she said, voice quiet but without pressure. "No press. No statements. Peace, if we want it." She didn't answer. Not yet. Her thumb tapped once. The text cursor blinked in the reply field. She typed, "Let's prepare the public notice," then deleted it. Typed again, "Draft the announcement. I'll approve wording tonight." She hit send. It was subtle, but it felt like lighting a fuse. Emily didn't ask what she'd written. She just sat beside her, sipping tea, watching the steam rise like breath from a mountain just beginning to stir. The hours passed slowly. The house, for once, did not feel full of tension or ghosts, just clarity. By nightfall, the first email arrived. Subject: Final filing confirmation. Recorded deed and arbitration sealed. Status: complete. She saved it. Forwarded it to herself twice. Printed it. Placed it in the drawer beside the original deed. Closed it softly. The kitchen was dim now. Light pooled under the stovetop lamp, glowing soft against the backsplash. Outside, crickets had begun their rhythm. Then, another sound. A ping. She picked up the phone. Emily's draft. For immediate release. As of this week, formal resolution has been reached in a private arbitration regarding legacy home ownership and estate acknowledgement. All parties signed willingly. At this time, elder property rights and maternal contributions have been recognized as equal. She read it once, twice, a third time. Then she typed 2 words at the bottom of the message. Send it. The phone dimmed. The kitchen quieted. The window panes reflected a woman no longer asking for space, no longer trapped between roles, no longer excluded from her own life. Just as the teapot began to rattle on the counter again, she looked up, because she knew the quiet wouldn't last. Knuckles tap, door opens carefully. 3 soft knocks, not hurried, not forceful, just cautious. She paused mid-step, the folded laundry still in her arms. The knock came again. Same rhythm, familiar but uncertain. She set the towels down, wiped her palms on her slacks, and moved toward the front door. When she opened it, the afternoon light cut across the porch just enough to illuminate the figure standing there. Michael. Shirt tucked, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. His. Posture wasn't defensive, but it wasn't relaxed either, like a man told to stand at attention but not raise alarms. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said. "Not mom, not mother. Ma'am." Her brows lifted slightly. He seemed to catch himself, hesitated, then offered a tired half-smile. "Is this a good time?" She didn't answer with words, just stepped aside. He entered slowly, scanning the room with the wariness of someone unsure whether the furniture had moved since the last time they sat in it. In the kitchen, Emily stood at the stove, stirring a pot with deliberate slowness. She turned, nodded once, and offered a polite smile. "Tea?" she asked. Michael hesitated, then gave a short nod. "Sure." The woman gestured toward the table. "Have a seat." He sat where he always had, his old spot at the head of the table. But this time it felt borrowed, like he was temporarily occupying the space, not owning it. She sat across from him. Emily set down 2 mugs. Steam coiled upward between them, smelling faintly of bergamot and something floral. No one spoke for a moment. Michael shifted, then reached into his coat pocket and produced a folded printout. "I saw the release," he said. "You went public." She nodded. "I didn't expect that." She held his gaze. "You should have." He looked down at the mug, one hand wrapped around it like he needed the warmth but couldn't quite drink. "I didn't come here to reopen anything," he said. I wanted to acknowledge that I read every word, and I understand how careful they were." Emily sat beside her mother, sipping her own tea, watchful but still. He continued, "You could have scorched me. You didn't." She tilted her head. "It wasn't about that." "No," he agreed, "but you still could have." The moment stretched. Steam drifted between them, softening the tension just enough to allow breath. "I talked to Dad's old hospice nurse," he said. "She told me you stayed every night the last 6 weeks. I didn't know that." "You never asked," she replied gently. He flinched. "I'm not asking you to take anything back," he said. "I know I crossed a line with the will." Emily blinked slowly but didn't interject. "I just want to talk terms," he added. "No lawyers, no standoff. I'll respect the deed, the settlement. I'd like access for the girls, holidays, rotation on property taxes, nothing formal, just clarity." She considered him for a long moment, then stood, walked to the drawer, and pulled out a slim folder. Inside, printed copies of boundaries already outlined, usage, contribution, inheritance structure, and agreed terms for shared spaces. She placed it gently on the table. "I had a feeling this day would come," she said. "You can take it home, review it, come back when you're not rehearsing." That stung, but only slightly. Michael reached for the folder, thumbed through the top page. "It's fair," he murmured. "It's final," she said. He nodded, stood, and held the folder tight. At the door, he turned. "Thank you," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "For what?" "For not disappearing, for not letting me pretend you had." She didn't reply, just watched as he opened the door, stepped through and paused 1 second too long before pulling it shut behind him. The latch clicked. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was balanced. A house no longer tipped in his direction. Emily looked over. "He'll be back." Her mother nodded. "But next time," she said, "he won't knock like a guest." "Afternoon sunlight warms living room." The living room hadn't changed. Same worn throw over the arm of the couch, same narrow stack of magazines on the coffee table. Same tiny crack in the window pane that caught the light just enough to make it sparkle. But everything felt different. The sunlight spilling through the western window wasn't harsh. It was soft, golden, low enough now to stretch shadows across the rug in slow, thoughtful lines. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and steeped tea. She sat in her usual chair, the one by the lamp, feet tucked beneath her, hands cradling a warm mug. She didn't sip yet, just held it. Let the warmth travel inward through her palms. Emily sat on the floor, cross-legged by the bookshelf, laughing at something in an old family photo album. Michael was on the sofa, not perched, not guarded, just seated, shoulders relaxed, elbows on knees. the same posture he used to have when he was 13 and asking for something he knew he didn't deserve, but was hoping for anyway. He looked around once, slowly, took in the quiet, the ease, the scent of home uncharged by tension. Then his eyes drifted toward his mother. He didn't smile exactly, but he didn't look away either. Their eyes met. It was the first look that didn't feel like a test. "Need more tea?" Emily asked brightly, standing and heading for the kitchen without waiting for an answer. The woman shook her head gently, amused. "She's never finished a full mug her whole life," she said. Michael chuckled, low and surprised. "She used to pour it into her plant when she thought no one was looking." Emily's voice floated in from the kitchen. "It made it grow faster!" Laughter bubbled between them, light, unforced, a sound she hadn't realized she'd been waiting to hear again. She leaned back, finally sipping the tea. The rhythm of the room slowed. Even her own breath felt steadier, deeper, like her lungs had been shallow for months and were only now remembering how to fill. Michael looked at the books lining the wall. "You kept Dad's fly reel." She followed his gaze. "He made me promise, said you'd want it after, but not too soon." Michael nodded once. He was right. Another small silence, comfortable this time, not filled with unsaid things, but with shared ones. Emily returned, settling beside her mother's chair. "So, you think we could do every other Sunday?" she asked casually. "Family dinner, rotating host, no arbitration required." Michael smirked. "You just want to show off your air fryer." "It's a culinary tool of progress," Emily said solemnly, raising her mug like a toast. Their mother smiled into her tea. It was remarkable, she thought, not how much they'd recovered, but how much had shifted without words. The house didn't need to shout its piece. It wore it like light. But still, there were boundaries, set not in anger, but in stone. Michael looked over, expression quiet. "If I cross any lines again, you'll tell me, right?" She met his eyes. "I won't need to," she said. He tilted his head, confused. She smiled, gently, without malice. "You'll feel it." Emily watched them both, her eyes soft with something like awe. "You're not angry anymore," she said to her mom. "No," her mother replied. "I'm not silent anymore. That's different." The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, second by second, marking a room in which time was no longer something to fear. Outside, a breeze stirred the wind chimes. Inside, 3 mugs clinked softly on the table as tea was poured again. This wasn't resolution. This was rhythm. But just as the quiet took hold again, the woman's phone buzzed once on the side table. A new email from a local reporter. Subject line, "Follow up on your statement, requesting interview." She stared at it for a moment, then reached for her mug again, steady as ever. Paper rustles under curious eyes. The printout lay flat on the kitchen table, smoothed 3 times over with the back of her hand, even though it had no creases. She had read the article twice already. Still, she read it a 3rd time. Elder Voices, One Woman's Quiet Fight for Recognition Reverberates Beyond Her Home, by Rachel Kimball, Metro Journal. The feature wasn't long, but it was measured, respectful. It detailed the arbitration, the deed revision, the sealed agreement, but what it highlighted most wasn't legal. It was presence. Words like steadfast, unacknowledged, legacy caregiver jumped off the page in serif font. Not flashy, not exaggerated, but steady, solid. She ran her fingers along the top edge of the page like tracing the top rail of a fence she now owned. Michael sat at the end of the table, reading silently, his glasses perched low on his nose, brows furrowed not in anger but thought. About halfway through he stopped, lifted his eyes, and stared at nothing. His throat worked once. Emily, seated to the woman's right, reached for his hand. He didn't pull away, just kept staring at the center of the table, eyes glossy with something like recognition. "They didn't use your name," he said finally, voice thick. "They didn't have to," she replied. Michael looked at her. Really looked. "They used mine." She nodded. A beat passed. "They quoted the release," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "It's already trending on the Metro Journal feed. A few hundred comments, mostly women, mostly older, all saying this, finally. She passed the phone to her mother, who scrolled slowly. The messages weren't dramatic. They were real. "She sounds like my mom, like me. My name wasn't on our mortgage either. I thought it was just the way things were. Signed my power of attorney away too early, following this case closely." A quiet settled over the room again, not uncomfortable, not mournful, but full, saturated. Then came the ping. Another notification. This time from a community resource board. Subject: Panel interest, elder voices and family estate equity, seeking lead speaker. She stared at it, blinking once. "What is it?" Michael asked. She turned the screen toward him. His mouth opened, then shut. Emily reached over and clicked the link. A web page loaded. Local Civic Center, quarterly programming. A new initiative in planning stages. Public conversations on aging and autonomy. They wanted someone to open it, someone with recent lived experience, dignity, and voice. Her name was listed, first tentatively, just a hyperlink. She looked at it for a long time. "It doesn't have to be anything," Emily offered gently. "It can be a thank you and nothing more." "But," Michael shook his head, "it already is something." She smiled softly. "We never meant for it to grow." Emily shrugged. "But roots don't ask for permission." The wind stirred outside, brushing branches against the window panes like a soft drum roll. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a lawnmower started. A reminder that life, no matter the moment, keeps going. Michael folded the article neatly, slid it across the table. "You should keep the original. Frame it if you want." "I don't need it on the wall," she said. "But you should still say yes," he added, eyes meeting hers. "Because you didn't just win something back, you taught something." She looked down at the screen again. That single link, that single invitation. A small breath escaped her lips, half laugh, half marvel. "I never planned to be public," she murmured. Emily leaned against her shoulder. "But you planned to be visible." She nodded, and for the first time the idea didn't scare her. It steadied her. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She tapped reply, typed one word, interested, then paused, because something else had arrived, quietly, at the top of her inbox. A message from a national publication. Subject line: "We're expanding the conversation. Can we talk?" Steps toward stage, heart steadying. The carpet beneath her feet was thick, clean, recently vacuumed, still bearing the faint parallel lines from a push-and-pull routine someone cared enough to finish just hours earlier. She stood behind the folding partition that separated the backstage from the community center's main hall, one hand resting lightly on the edge of a podium. Her breath came slow, deep, even. The paper in her other hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant to speak and be heard. A volunteer with a name tag that read, "Sherry," leaned in from the curtain. "5 minutes," she whispered. "You're first up." The woman nodded. On the other side of the partition, chairs scraped. Voices settled. The air shifted from chatter to expectancy. She took another breath, then looked down. The first page of her talk bore no dramatic title, just a name, Margaret Thomas, a second name, Emily Thomas, and below them, care, voice, and inheritance. The real estate of memory. She didn't write that part. Emily did. But now, reading it, it felt right. A chime sounded. Lights dimmed slightly. A modest stage light warmed the edge of the curtain. She stepped out. The room wasn't large. Maybe 60 people. Folded chairs in neat rows. A banner behind her that read, "Elder Voices, Modern Families," in soft serif. Not bold, just present. She found the podium, hands settled on each side. No microphone, no script, just her. In the second row, Michael sat still, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded in his lap. He gave no wave, no smile, just a steady, quiet gaze. In the front row, Emily leaned slightly forward, face tilted in a subtle nod of encouragement. The woman began. "When I was first told I mattered in my own home, it wasn't because someone said it aloud. It was because I said no more." She paused. The silence met her, not with resistance, but with respect. "For years my name was left off the documents, The deeds, the decisions. Not because I wasn't involved, but because involvement and recognition are not the same. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Not disapproval, understanding. She continued, slowly, carefully. I didn't come here today to point fingers, or even to correct the past. I came because I know too many of you are still living in the quiet space where being indispensable and being invisible somehow overlap. Michael dropped his gaze, a hand moving to his knee. Inheritance is not just financial. It is the voice we are, or are not, given while we're still alive. A woman in the back blinked rapidly behind thick glasses. Today, I have a deed in my drawer, but more importantly, I have a daughter who stood beside me, a son who now listens when I speak, and a house that no longer feels borrowed. Silence. Then, applause. Not a wave. A bloom. Slow, then building. Hands clapping not for show, but in rhythm with something they recognized in themselves. She stepped back from the podium. The host returned, thanking her, inviting panelists forward, but she didn't hear much after that. She found her way to a side chair, took a sip of water, and let her shoulders fall back against the rest. Michael approached a few minutes later, crouched beside her, and whispered, "You sounded like you've been doing this forever." She smiled. "I was doing it for years. You just weren't listening." He let out a quiet laugh. Emily returned, holding a clipboard. "Sign-ups," she said. "For a follow-up group. 5 already, all women." She handed it to her mother, who scanned the names. One of them had added a comment in the margin beside her own name. "I thought I was the only one." The woman's throat tightened, just slightly. She closed her hand around the clipboard. Outside, the auditor. Yum. Wind stirred leaves across the sidewalk. A child's laughter echoed from the nearby playground. A world moved on, unaware that something had just shifted. But inside, hope had settled. Not loud, not dramatic, but firm. Family gathers in sunlit living room. The light filled the living room in wide, generous strokes. Golden through the windows, it pooled across the rug, warmed the edges of framed photos, and cast long, soft shadows behind the houseplants that had somehow managed to survive another season. Margaret stood by the entryway mirror, smoothing the front of her blouse. Not to impress, not to prepare. Just to feel ready. Behind her, the sound of chairs scooting, footsteps, low laughter. The front door was open. Emily stood outside, waving in Michael and the girls. "Take your shoes off this time," Emily called. "No exceptions." Michael smirked and obeyed, pulling his youngest daughter's sneaker off before she could hop away. Inside, the house didn't feel like it had guests. It felt like it had come back to itself. Margaret turned from the mirror and walked into the room. The girls ran up to her, wrapping their arms around her waist, their hair wild from wind and excitement. "We saw you on Mommy's phone," the older one said. "You were talking to a lot of people." Margaret smiled and knelt. "And now I get to talk to you." From the kitchen, Emily's voice floated in. "Tea's steeping. Don't touch the tray until I say." Michael entered a moment later, holding a thin rectangular box. He cleared his throat. "Before we sit," he opened the lid. Inside, a wooden frame. One side held the printed Metro Journal article, sealed behind glass. The other side, a copy of the newly recorded deed. "Thought it deserved more than a drawer," he said, gently placing it on the shelf just inside the front entry. Margaret didn't speak. She just looked at it. The words. The names. Side by side. Proof, not just of ownership, but of arrival. Emily appeared beside her, holding a tray of tea and small plates with lemon shortbread. "No speeches today," she warned, "just clinking cups and eating cookies." They all gathered around the coffee table. The mugs were mismatched, collected over years, but somehow they fit together perfectly. Michael sat back into the couch, his shoulders at ease in a way she hadn't seen since long before arbitration. "I keep getting emails from other families," he said. "People asking what we did, what they should ask their parents, what to check for." He looked up, eyes glistening, but not overwhelmed. "Maybe it was never about winning," he said. "Maybe it was about learning how to listen." Emily reached for her mother's hand. Squeezed. "I told you," she whispered. You didn't just make space for yourself. You cracked open a door for everyone else." Margaret looked at them both, and for the first time, the weight of history didn't sit on her shoulders. It stood behind her, like scaffolding. "I didn't crack it open," she said softly. "I opened it." The tea steamed upward. The mugs clinked together in a quiet, unceremonious toast. Outside, a breeze carried faint sounds of a weekend farmer's market. The rustle of bags, distant voices, the faint hum of music from a nearby booth. Inside, the house hummed too, not with tension, but with rhythm. They stayed like that for a while, talking, sipping, reaching for seconds, the kind of gathering that didn't need orchestration or apologies, just shared breath. Later, when the others had gone outside to walk the girls to the park, Margaret remained in the entryway for a moment. She stood before the frame, the deed, the article, and her reflection layered faintly behind the glass. She reached up and touched the edge of the frame, steady. Then, slowly, she took a deep breath, one that filled her chest fully. Not a breath for battle, not for performance, but for permanence, because the house was no longer a gift she had to earn. It was a legacy she had chosen to own.